Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was a turning point in Jewish history. Before World War II began, the Jewish people were very passive and never fought back. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the first time the Jewish people ever fought back. 1942 was the year Hitler decided to liquidate the ghettos. More than 2 million Jews who had survived the ghettos were deported to death camps within 18 months. The Jewish police were ordered to round up people for deportation. About 300,000 people were packed into cattle cars and were sent to the Treblinka death camp and were murdered, leaving 55 to 60,000 Jews in the ghetto. In April of 1943, the Jews heard of the Germans' plan to deport all of the remaining people in the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka. Then an organization called the Jewish Fighting Organization, or ZOB, was formed by a group of mostly young people. The ZOB was led by Mordecai Anielewicz, who was 23 years old and wanted the Jewish people to resist going to the railroad cars. In January of 1943, Warsaw Ghetto fighters fired on German troops when they tried to gather another group of ghetto occupants for deportation. The fighters had a small supply of weapons which had been smuggled into the ghetto. The fighters used these weapons, and after a few days, the troops fled. This little triumph inspired the ghetto fighters to get ready for future resistance. The Jews in Warsaw believed that what had happened in January was proof that the Germans would end their plans if the Jews offered resistance. A lot of Jews thought that as long as they were passive, the Germans would persist in unrestrained mass deportations. The Jews felt that if they resisted and confronted the Germans would then think twice about what they were doing. The Germans would also have to take into account that there was a possibility of the outbreak of fighting in Warsaw, leading to a rebellion spreading to the Polish population. Now, what was left of the civilian population of the ghetto approved of resistance and supported the preparations for uprising. The Jews began training after the January battle. They gathered weapons and made plans to defend the ghetto. However, the Germans also prepared for the possibility of a fight. The ghetto fighters heard of when the final deportation was to occur, so the entire Jewish population went into hiding. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising began on April 19, 1943, when German troops and police entered the ghetto to deport the people who had survived so far. 750 armed fighters faced more than 2,000 heavily armed and well-trained German troops. When the Germans were forced to withdraw from the ghetto, they returned with more firepower. After fighting for numerous days, the German commander, General Jürgen Stroop, ordered the ghetto to be burned to the ground. But the Jews continued against the great force for 27 days. The headquarters bunker of the ZOB was captured on May 8th. Mordecai Anielewicz and his colleagues were killed in the fight, but many fighters escaped through the sewers. On May 16th, it was announced by General Stroop that the fighting was over. He said 56,056 Jews were captured by his forces. He announced he was going to blow up the Great Synagogue, which is outside the ghetto, to show his victory, and because the Jewish quarter of Warsaw no longer exists. About 300 Germans and 7,000 Jews were killed in the uprising, and another 7,000 Jews were sent to Treblinka. Because the Germans began systematically setting fire to the buildings in the Warsaw Ghetto and blowing them up, the Jewish combatants took refuge in bunkers. The bunker wars lasted an entire month. People left from burning buildings and tried to go from bunker to bunker. In order to locate the underground bunkers, the Germans used hounds, listening devices, and informers. Once they were detected, they would throw poisonous gases into the bunkers, forcing the inhabitants out. However, some Jews who had been hiding in bunkers survived because they had not been found.
But I never had a feeling of freedom. The idea didn't even enter my consciousness. I grew up with the feeling that I can't get close to anyone because I will lose them, and that I won't ever be safe. To tell you the truth, I don't think I've ever felt like I was a free person or free from threat. To this day, I don't feel that way.